If you're deploying Azure SQL Managed Instance or Azure App Service environment and wondering why it takes forever or fails completely, there's a critical subnet configuration you're probably missing, and it's called Subnet Delegation.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Network Ninja Cloudcast. I'm here with our resident cloud architect, and today we're diving into something I've honestly been confused about.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Subnet Delegation trips up a lot of people because it sounds optional, but for certain Azure Pay services, it's absolutely mandatory.
Okay, so what exactly is subnet delegation? I've seen it in the Azure portal, but I usually just skip past it.
Think of it like reserving a parking garage floor for a specific company's vehicles only. When you delegate a subnet to a service like Microsoft.SQL/managed instances, you're telling Azure that this entire subnet belongs exclusively to that service. No other resources can deploy there.
So it's like a reserved section. But why would Azure need that? Can't resources just share the subnet?
Great question. And here's where the technical reality kicks in. Certain PaaS services need to inject their own network interfaces, apply specific network security rules, and manage IP allocation themselves. Azure SQL Managed Instance, for example, deploys a virtual cluster inside your subnet and needs complete control over the IP address space. If you had random VMs or other resources in there, it would break the service's internal networking.
Wait, so the service actually takes over the subnet? That's more invasive than I thought.
Exactly right. When you delegate a subnet, you're granting that service permission to associate service-specific configurations. According to Microsoft's documentation, the delegated service can add its own network intent policies. Now, these aren't just traffic rules like NSGs. Network intent policies are a mechanism that lets the delegated service express its networking requirements, including service association links, route tables, and service endpoint preparation. Azure then enforces these to ensure the subnet meets the service's needs. For Azure SQL Managed Instance specifically, Microsoft recommends a minimum /26 subnet with 64 addresses for most deployments, and /24 for maximum flexibility. The general purpose tier can technically work with /27, but you'll want that extra room for scaling and maintenance operations.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. If I create a subnet with CIDR block 10.0.1.0 out of 26 and delegate it to SQL Managed Instance, nothing else can live in that subnet?
Correct. That subnet becomes exclusive to managed instance deployments. Now, technically, you can deploy multiple managed instances in the same delegated subnet if you have enough IP addresses, but here's an important caveat. Microsoft strongly recommends against this for production workloads. Each instance should ideally have its own dedicated subnet because scaling operations on one instance can affect others. Maintenance windows become complicated, and the virtual cluster is shared, creating dependencies between instances.
Good to know. So one instance per subnet for production. What other services require delegation?
The big ones are Azure SQL Managed Instance, with Microsoft.SQL/managed instances, Azure App Service Environment with Microsoft.web/hosting environments, Azure Container Instances with Microsoft.container instance/container groups, Azure NetApp Files with Microsoft.NetApp/volumes, and Azure Databricks with Microsoft.Databricks/workspaces. Each has different subnet size requirements. Container Instances needs a subnet that can accommodate your container groups, so size it based on how many you plan to deploy. NetApp Files requires at least a /28, which gives you 16 addresses with only 11 usable after Azure reserves 5, but Microsoft recommends /26 or larger for production. And here's a gotcha with Databricks. It actually requires 2 delegated subnets, a public and a private one, for VNA injection. A lot of people miss that and wonder why their deployment fails.
So I need to plan my virtual network address space carefully up front. If I delegate a /26 to SQL Managed Instance, those 64 addresses are gone from my available pool.
You've got it. This is why I always tell teams to design their VNet with delegation in mind from day one. A common mistake I see is people creating a single large subnet like 10.0.0.0 out of 16 and then realizing they can't delegate part of it. You have to create separate, appropriately sized subnets for each delegated service.
What happens if I try to deploy something else into a delegated subnet?
Azure returns an error immediately. The portal will show subnet is delegated to Microsoft.SQL/managed instances and cannot be used for other resource types. The deployment fails before it even starts, which is actually good because it prevents configuration drift.
One thing I'm still unclear on. Can I remove delegation after I've set it up?
Only if the subnet is empty. You must delete all resources deployed by that delegated service first. For SQL Managed Instance, that means deleting all instances in the subnet, and I want to set expectations here. This is typically a 4 to 6 hour operation, sometimes longer. The instance deletion itself takes hours, and then the virtual cluster cleanup after the last instance is removed adds more time. Plan for this to be a half-day operation at minimum.
Let me recap what I've learned. Subnet delegation reserves an entire subnet for a specific Azure PaaS service. The service gets exclusive control over that subnet's IP addresses and can apply network intent policies for its specific requirements. I need to plan my address space carefully because delegated subnets can't be shared. For SQL Managed Instance, I should use one instance per subnet in production. Some services like Databricks need multiple delegated subnets. And removing delegation requires emptying the subnet first, which can take many hours.
Perfect summary. My pro tip is to create a dedicated resource group for each delegated subnet and its associated service. It makes lifecycle management much cleaner when you need to tear things down.
That's really practical advice. This whole concept makes a lot more sense now.
That's it for today's episode. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
And share this with anyone deploying PaaS services in Azure. This will save them hours of troubleshooting.
Thanks for watching the Network Ninja Cloudcast. See you in the next one.